All right. Hello, hello. This does not seem to be working. Hold up. What is going on? Turn this thing off somehow. Okay, sorry about that. Some technical difficulties. Start right here. Okay, hello. All right, here we go. I'm actually a little nervous because I haven't done this in so long. Let's see. This is the Kung Fu Life podcast, and I'm your host, Leo. It's been a long time for me, guys, and I apologize. I'm actually feeling a little bit nervous, I guess, just because it's been so long that I've done one of these episodes. But I'm hoping to get back into the groove of things and get started. I am still, working through my personal issues. There's been no real progress, I guess you could say, on those aspects of my life. I've just been working through it, dealing with it. I guess at first I didn't really realize how much it was affecting me, but it is affecting me quite a bit. It's hard for me to sleep sometimes, and well, a lot of the time, and things don't seem to be getting any better with my wife or with with her cancer or with our relationship, unfortunately. So it's been a lot of stress. I've been dealing with it just by mainly trying to keep a positive attitude, which, having my son here helps tremendously, and spending as much time with him as I can, and just enjoying the parts of life that I can enjoy. And work, work can take my mind off of it occasionally. That's not that effective though. But, what are you gonna do? You just gotta get through it. The one thing that actually has helped quite a bit is we've actually been going to church pretty consistently now for the past, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. So that has helped. I feel like I've been getting a lot out of the messages, much more than I ever got growing up. And actually, I'm going to share with you guys a little bit of my thoughts about it. And I know some people might say, "Oh, it's so cliche." Goes through some tough times, so now all of a sudden he's a God-fearing man. And if that's what you're thinking, first of all, fuck you. Secondly, I thought that as well. But if there is anything that God is there for, it's for times like these. And so, to me, it's a non-factor. that's what you're supposed to do. The trick is you're supposed to actually keep it up after the pain has subsided as well, which I will do. But I'll leave it at that. I did want to say, so I guess what I wanted to share with you guys, there's been something that's been on my mind, and I've been thinking about it because I have been thinking about my faith, and I don't mean to make this into some like Christian podcast or anything like that. It's not my intention. This is Kung Fu life. This is my life. This is what I'm dealing with and how I'm dealing with it. And so it might be of some use to some people. And so I felt like I have to share this. I have to share what I think, what I've been thinking, and my belief, because this is really the only thing that's been getting me through this difficult period of my life. So one of the things I was thinking was, I guess I should give you some background. I grew up Catholic. I grew up going to a Catholic church. Uh, went through youth group. Got I feel like a bad Christian now, forgetting the name of the thing you go through so that you can take communion. Confirmation. I went through confirmation, that whole process. I was baptized when I was a baby, and all that sort of thing. So I kind of grew up with it ingrained in my system, and then somewhere around the time frame of I don't know, I was probably getting into my teens, maybe into my teens for a little bit, 14, 15. I don't know exactly what happened, but I remember distinctly thinking that, and actually, you know what, now that I think about it, it might be more like 17 years old. I remember distinctly thinking that, what's the difference between good and bad? And that maybe, and the thought occurred to me, maybe there is no difference between good and bad, that there is no good and bad, that all there is are actions. And it's a nihilistic point of view, and I kind of got wrapped up in that thought pattern, and I think that led me down to a very dark path, which has led to a lot of issues I've had in my life. I think I'm out of that now, and now I'm dealing with other things. So I wanted to give you that insight because I've questioned my faith before, for a long time actually, and still now, like I have there's some part of me, that part of me is like, oh well, is it really real? Is God real? Was Jesus real? I've pretty much come to the conclusion that Jesus was real. I mean, there's a lot of things that have gone into this, and I'm actually writing like a little treaty, I guess, if you will, on belief and why you should believe, and and why it doesn't make sense to not believe in a certain point of view. So, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. I'm recording a video for this one as well, which I haven't done in even longer of a time. And partly I'm doing it because so that anybody who's interested can see my shaved head. I've actually shaved my head all the way down to the skin, and in support of my wife, and she had to shave her head. I shaved her head actually, and I helped her with it, and then I decided to shave mine. And actually, honestly, I kind of like it. It's kind of nice, but so I haven't completely decided if I'm gonna grow it back or not. But anyways, but so I was writing this paper. And I'm sorry, I'm a little bit scattered brain. Um, if you haven't noticed already. But back to the idea of belief and the importance of it, and why you should, and uh, and why it's a good idea. It's kind of been rolling around in my head for a while now, and I mentioned a little bit about it, I think, on the last podcast, where I said that regardless of whether you're an atheist or an agnostic, your life has been impacted uh, by the Christian God, the Bible, and people's belief in that God. And you know, I so I did a little bit of research, and I'm gonna do some more. But as of 2020, Christians numbered 2.5 billion out of a population of 7.8 billion. That's 32% of the entire world. And the next was Islam, which, to my surprise, actually shares many stories from the Old Testament with the Bible, with the Christian Bible. And for example, Moses, Daniel, the book of Daniel, and a few others, and even the angels, like some of the angels, they consider the angels as well. So and of course there's Judaism as well, but the Islam makes up about 25% of the world population. So if you put those together, and then you also add in top Judaism, which is that only had, I think, 14 million people in it, so it wasn't much. Uh, but if you just take Islam and Christians, that's 57% of the world that believes in some of the same stories. But regardless, even if you take out Islam, 32% of the entire world. And you know what I will do as well is I'm going to look up the Western people, and like Western Europe, uh, America, Great Britain, all those places, and see how many Christians are in each of those areas, and add them together, because I bet you it's a much higher percentage. But anyways, 32% of the entire world has a belief, or professes to have a belief in Christianity. So if you think that you have not been affected and have some relationship to the Bible and Christ, then you're wrong. Because you have, especially if you live here in the United States. But that was one of the points I'm going to bring up in this paper that I'm writing. The second thing I was thinking about was, did Jesus really do all those miracles? Is there really a God? That sort of thing that a lot of people, I think about, at least at some point in their life. I know I have. And I was thinking, the thought occurred to me that the proof isn't really in those miracles that Jesus performed or anything like that. The proof is in the message that he gave, the message in the Bible. Things like turn the other cheek. I mean, think about the time frame that he was living in. There was the Roman Empire was still going. There was all these terrible things that had just brutality everywhere. I mean, they hung him on a cross. On a cross. They tortured him and then hung him on a cross. And if you, I mean, and one of the things that kind of convinced me, or one of the several things that convinced me that there really was a person named Jesus in that time period, in that area of the world, professing to be the Messiah. And really, it was his disciples professing him to be the Messiah. But if you think about that time frame and all that brutality going on around him, and here he is telling people that they should turn the other cheek. What human would say that? What human would be there in that time period, even in this time period, when you've been subjected to all sorts of things in your life, and even now, most people, I think, if someone hit them, they would say, no, you should hit them back. But this guy, back in maybe definitely one of the more violent periods of history, was telling people to turn the other cheek. Not only that, but he was also professing acceptance of all other religions. I mean, they did say that all the other religions were false, but you still accept it. Even in the Bible, they say if an unbeliever marries a believer, that's fine. Or I mean, if a believer marries an unbeliever, that's fine. It's okay. Stay married to them. I mean, what person from that time frame, or even from this time frame, would say things like this? Would teach the things that he taught? And so to me, that is proof enough. But then you also take into account there's some like diaries or journals from some Roman generals that write about, what's going on during that time frame, and they mention Jesus. Now that was the Romans were the ones who killed Jesus. They were the enemy of Jesus. And yet they're mentioning him in one of their journals. So they're admitting the fact that he was alive. And the fact that they're actually mentioning him means that he was having a great impact at that time. So, if you want to believe he didn't exist, then whatever. I believe he did. And that is proof enough. But the message, the important part to me is that even the message is what tells you, is the proof, is the evidence. I mean, it's crazy. I've got some other points in there that I'm bringing up in the paper, but I don't want to get too deep into it here. Maybe I will once I finish the paper, but once I flesh out all my thoughts, I'm calling it a paper like I'm going to publish it somewhere. I'm not really planning to publish it. I'm just writing it for myself and to flesh out my thoughts on the matter and and because I feel like it's something that God is calling me to do, and I also feel like it's something that talking about it on here is something that I am supposed to do as well. So I don't know if that has any impact on anybody out there, but hopefully it does. If not, no harm, no foul. But think about it at least. And I guess I should give you some. Going to church. I've been going to this. It's called FCF's Church, Frederick Christian Fellowship Church, and it's been really good. I mean, every sermon I've listened to has spoken to me. And the same is true for a podcast I've been listening to lately. Excuse me. And it's called The Potter's House, I think. Potter's House Church. The pastor's Pastor Torrey Roberts and his wife Sarah. And I've been really enjoying their speeches and their sermons, I guess. And almost every single one of their podcasts has hit me in a certain way and has been impactful to me. So if you're interested in it, then I would say check out one of those podcasts and just see if you like it. And I've kind of mentioned before the Jordan Peterson podcast, or his lectures, his biblical lectures in particular. That's really kind of what got me started going or thinking about God more and bringing God more into my life. And his whole thing is that, really listen to his lectures because they're amazing. Because he's kind of saying the same thing I said here, but in a different way. He's saying the message is so good. If you really look into it, the message in the Bible is so good that you have to pay attention to it, that you have to understand it. And he explains why, and he goes through all the way through Exodus, I think, and covers the story there, the stories there. So listen to that too. That's really good. But back to the official podcast. I guess this is episode 43. I wanted to. Well, first off, I wanted to say that we kind of hit a milestone, I guess, or a little bit of a milestone. I mean, there have been over 6,000 downloads of this podcast, and it's been around the world, so it's pretty cool to think about and to see. But 6,000, for me, I mean, that seems like a lot of people to reach. Maybe, it's not, that's probably not 6,000 people. I'm sure some people have listened to multiple episodes, so it's been that's just the amount of times it's been downloaded. Excuse me, but it's been around the world. There's over 3,700 in North America, over 1,300 in Europe, 361 in Asia, 351 in Oceania, which is basically Australia, New Zealand. 99 downloads in Africa, 151 in South America. So it's all around the world, and the different countries, the top 10 countries: United States, obviously number one, United Kingdom, Canada, Germany, Australia, New Zealand, Netherlands, Philippines, which is kind of cool. I'm half Filipino, just in case you didn't know. Brazil, and Mexico. And then the cities, the top 10 cities, all American cities: Columbus, Ohio; San Jose, California; Los Angeles, California; Frederick, Maryland, which is where I live, which is really interesting. I'm not sure if that's something to do with because I'm from here and maybe there's some sort of locator or something. But anyways, that's some sort of algorithm that picks that up. But there's been 63 downloads from Frederick, Maryland, Atlanta, Georgia; Lake Stevens, Washington; Charlotte, North Carolina; Dublin, Leinster, I'm guessing that's Dublin, Ireland; Chicago, Illinois; Sydney, New South Wales. I guess they're not all American cities. So, I mean, that's pretty cool. It's pretty cool that, maybe some people, it could just be robots, I guess, or those bots, whatever, that download stuff. But that's pretty cool that there's potentially people from all over the world listening. And hopefully it's providing some value. But today I wanted to talk about or read through a relatively short chapter in or passage in this book called The Code of the Samurai uh, by Nazo Nitobi. That's the book right there if you're looking at the video. It's a pretty cool looking book. You know, we started getting into Miyamoto Musashi a while back, and that's what led me to pick up this book, actually. But I haven't had a chance to really get through it. But I think this is a good opportunity to do it. So chapter 1, Bushido as an ethical system. Let me get some water. Chivalry is a flower no less indigenous to the soil of Japan than its emblem, the cherry blossom. Also, our emblem of the Moyat Kung Fu family, and really Wing Chun. Nor is it a dried up specimen of an antique virtue preserved in the herbarium of our history. It is still a living object of power and beauty among us, and if it assumes no tangible shape or form, it nonetheless scents the moral atmosphere and makes us aware that we are still under its potent spell. The conditions of society which brought it forth and nourished it have long disappeared. But as those faraway stars which once were and are not still continue to shed their rays upon us, I like that passage, so the light of chivalry, which was a child of feudalism, still illuminates our moral path, surviving its mother institution. It is a pleasure to me to reflect upon this subject in the language of Burke, who uttered the well-known touching eulogy over the neglected beer of its European prototype. That's a nice paragraph. That's a very nice paragraph. Good job, Nitobi. It argues a sad defect of information concerning the Far East. When so erudite a scholar as Dr. George Miller did not hesitate to affirm that chivalry or any other similar institution has never existed either among the nations of antiquity or among the modern Orientals. Such ignorance, however, is amply excusable, as the third edition of the good doctor's work appeared the same year that that Commodore Perry was knocking at the portals of our exclusivism. More than a decade later, about the time that our feudalism was in the last throes of existence, Karl Marx, writing his Das Kapital, called the attention of his readers to the peculiar advantage of studying the social and political institutions of feudalism, as then to be seen in living form only in Japan. I would likewise invite the Western historical and ethical student to study of chivalry in the Japan of the present. Enticing as it is a history disquisition on the comparison between European and Japanese feudalism and chivalry, it is not the purpose of this paper to enter into it at length. My attempt is rather to relate, firstly, the origin and sources of our chivalry, secondly, its character and teaching, thirdly, its influence among the masses, and fourthly, the continuity and permanence of its influence. Of these several points, the first will be only brief and cursory, or else I should have to take my readers into the devious paths of our national history. The second will be dwelt upon at greater length as being most likely to interest students of international ethics and comparative ethology in our ways of thought and action, and the rest will be dealt with as corollaries. The Japanese word which I have roughly rendered chivalry is, in the original, more expressive than horsemanship, Bushido means literally military knight ways, the ways which fighting nobles should observe in their daily life as well as in their vocation. In a word, the precepts of knighthood, the noblesse oblige, I think, of the warrior class. Having thus given its literal significance, I may be allowed henceforth to use the word in the original. The use of the original term is also advisable, for this reason that a teaching so circumscribed and unique, engendering a cast of mind and character so peculiar, so local, must wear the badge of its singularity on its face. Then some words have a national timbre, so expressive of race characteristics that the best of translators can do them but scant justice, not to say positive injustice and grievance. Who can improve by translation what the German Gemuth signifies, or who does not feel the difference between the two words verbally so closely allied as the English gentleman and the French gentilhomme? I think that's how you pronounce it. Bushido, then, is the code of moral principles which the knights were required or instructed to observe. It is not a written code. At best, it consists of a few maxims handed down from mouth to mouth or coming from the pen of some well-known warrior or savant. More frequently, it is a code unuttered and unwritten, possessing all the more the powerful sanction of veritable deed, and of a law written on the fleshy tablets of the heart. It was founded not on the creation of one brain, however able, or on the life of a single personage, however renowned. It was an organic growth of decades and centuries of military career. It perhaps fills the same position in the history of ethics that the English Constitution does in political history. Yet it has had nothing to compare with the Magna Carta or the Habeas Corpus Act. True, early in the 17th century, military statutes were promulgated, but their 13 short articles were taken up mostly with marriages, castles, leagues, etc. And the didactic regulations were but meagerly touched upon. We cannot, therefore, point out any definite time and place and say, here is its fountain head. Only as it attains consciousness in the feudal age, its origin, in respect to time, may be identified with feudalism. But feudalism itself is woven of many threads, and Bushido shares its intricate nature. As in England, the political institutions of feudalism may be said to date from the Norman conquest. So we may say that in Japan, its rise was simultaneous with the ascendancy of the Yoritomo late in the 12th century. As, however, in England, we find the social elements of feudalism far back in the period previous to William the Conqueror. So, too, the germs of feudalism in Japan had been long existent before the period I have mentioned. Again, in Japan as in Europe, when feudalism was formally inaugurated, the professional class of warriors naturally came into prominence. These were known as samurai, meaning literally, like the Old English CNIHT, which basically came down to mean knight, guards or attendants, resembling in character of the soldiery whom Caesar mentioned as existing in Aquitania, or the comitate, who, according to, oh man, these names are killing me, Tacitus followed Germanic chiefs in his time, or to take a still later parallel, the Militis Medi that one reads about in the history of medieval Europe. A Sinico Japanese word, buki or bushi, fighting knights was also adopted in common use. They were a privileged class and must originally have been a rough breed who made fighting their vocation. This class was naturally recruited in a long period of constant warfare from the manliest and the most adventurous, and all the while the process of elimination went on, the timid and the feeble being sorted out, and only a rude race of all masculine with brutish strength, to borrow Emerson's phrase, surviving to form families and the ranks of the samurai, coming to profess great honor and great privileges and correspondingly great responsibilities. They soon felt the need of a common standard of behavior, especially as they were always on a belligerent footing and belonged to different clans. Just as physicians limit competition among themselves by professional courtesy, just as lawyers sit in courts of honor in cases of violated etiquette, so must also warriors possess some resort for final judgment on their misdemeanors. Fair play in fight. What fertile germs of morality lie in this primitive sense of savagery in childhood? Is it not the root of all military and civic virtues? We smile as if we had outgrown it, at the boyish desire of the small Britisher, Tom Brown, to leave behind him the name of a fellow who never bullied a little boy or turned his back on a big one. And yet, who does not know that this desire is the cornerstone on which moral structures of mighty dimensions can be reared? May I not go even so far as to say that the gentlest and most peace-loving of religions endorses this aspiration? This desire of Tom's is the basis on which the greatness of England is largely built, and it will not take us long to discover that Bushido does not stand on a lesser pedestal. If fighting in itself, be it offensive or defensive, is, as Quakers rightly testify, brutal and wrong, we can still say with Lessing, we know from what failings our virtue springs. Sneaks and cowards are epithets of the worst opprobrium to healthy, simple natures. Childhood begins life with these notions, and knighthood also. But as life grows larger and its relations many-sided, the early faith seeks sanction from higher authority and more rational sources for its own justification, satisfaction, and development. If military interest had operated alone, without higher moral support, how far or short of chivalry would the ideal of knighthood have fallen? In Europe, Christianity interpreted it with concessions convenient to chivalry, and fused it nevertheless with spiritual data. Religion, war, and glory were the three souls of a perfect Christian knight, says Lamartine. In Japan, there were several sources of Bushido. So, that's the first chapter. It's kind of an interesting take on things. I mean, he's talking about the Christian knight, obviously the Templars, which, nowhere in the Bible does it say to go out and essentially run a jihad against all the other religions or people. That was purely a man-made thing. But anyways, there you have it. Maybe we'll get a little bit more into this book. I probably won't read through the whole thing, but I have a feeling that there's some chapters in here that are pretty good. So, there you have it, number 43. Anyways, thank you guys for listening, and God bless.